Hi everyone. So a lot of people have been asking me,
Is Grandchildren Bakers academia reopened or have you been baking?
no, I have not been baking. It has been very hard for me to step into the kitchen and I am not ready at all to make any of mom's recipes. But I thought I'd take baby steps with you and try somebody else's recipe. This is a chai coconut banana bread and it is by Radhi Devlukia. I really love Radhi's work. She has taught me so much about Ayurveda, and if any of you are interested in that, let me know and I'll make a video about it because I love Ayurveda. It's a practice that means so much to me and has helped me heal so much over the past 2 years. I'm also making this recipe because it is dairy free and gluten free. And over the past 2 years, when mom moved to Toronto and we had our bakery, Brown Sugar Bakers, mom challenged herself to make all our recipes dairy free, gluten free, sugar free, and nut free. Which is very hard because those are the basic ingredients in most of our recipes. Um, but when I explained to mom that having food that meets dietary needs allows people who don't usually have access to these baked goods to have access to these baked goods, it made sense to her. For mom, baking was all about community, and so if she could provide baked goods for people who wouldn't usually get those baked goods, she was game. I was just so inspired by that for somebody who's made cakes for decades to still be so open to learning something new and to challenging herself to pursue an area of growth. So yeah, I'm gonna do the same today. I have cooked vegan baked goods in the past, but they're definitely not my specialty. So I'm going to challenge myself today too. And if you want to bake together with me, I will also be including the recipe in the description below, just in case that is helpful. Anything else? Yes. One of the main reasons I also chose this recipe is because I have most of the ingredients at home and I just love baking and cooking like that. My mom and grandma really value not wasting food, and that's something that they passed down to me. So every week when I'm deciding what to bake or cook, I usually just look at the ingredients I already have and go from there. It's a great tip if you feel like you always struggle to finish up the ingredients in your house, and then they go bad, and then that sucks. Yeah. Okay, let's get started. Oh, one more thing actually. I thought we could have a little bit of mom with us today. This is her apron from when she was the Wilton cake decorating instructor. I'm gonna be honest, I never wear an apron. This is just for the camera. I just risk it for the biscuit. You know, if food's gonna fall on my clothes, which it usually does because I'm very clumsy, so be it. Maybe that's their fate. Okay, let's get started. For the dry ingredients, we need gluten-free flour, desiccated coconut. You can substitute shredded coconut here if you don't mind feeling bits of coconut when you bite into the banana bread. Brown sugar, I don't have unrefined, so I just used refined. Baking soda, chai spice mix. I usually prefer making my own, but for the sake of accessibility, I use this cutting chai masala by the Indian Pantry. I will leave a link in the description below. Whole cardamom, which I will be grinding into a powder because it tastes much fresher than the pre-ground stuff. I didn't have chopped walnuts, so I chopped up some whole pecans. And then I also chopped up some dates. For the wet ingredients, we need non-dairy milk. I used soy. Plant-based butter. I used salted because I feel like plant-based butter doesn't have much flavor. Flaxseed meal, which we will be turning into a flax egg, and ripe bananas. I'm a slow chopper, so I prep the pecans, dates, and cardamom before preheating the oven to make sure I have my banana bread batter ready by the time the oven is ready. Growing up, Mom didn't like wasting gas or electricity, so she taught me to use the oven from the moment it was preheated. She would actually use the oven even while it was preheating, but I'm not on that level yet. At this point, you're probably asking yourself, why in the world is Kirsten chopping one pecan at a time? Well, my perfectionist of a mother taught me that chopping nuts one at a time ensures they're all the same size and reduces the number of nut crumbs, which can significantly change the texture of your baked good. But honestly, do whatever feels good to you. I also slipped a tea towel under my chopping board because it was moving a little, and this helps make sure it stays in place. Once I was done with the pecans, I went on to chop the dates. This recipe calls for 10 dates and I had 15, but I figured it would be fine. And after the dates, I went on to grind the cardamom. I estimated around 8 pods for half a teaspoon of cardamom powder. I'm just going to use my mortar and pestle to grind it up, but just in case you've never done this before, let me actually bring you closer so you can see what I'm talking about. So first I crushed each pod once to crack it open, and then I removed the shell and emptied the contents of each pod into my mortar. And then I ground everything up into a powder with my pestle. I was now ready to preheat my oven, so I set it for 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then double checked that we weren't storing any pots or pans in there. Before mixing my dry ingredients, I made my flax egg, which I'd never made before, but apparently you just mix 1 tablespoon of flax meal and 2.5 tablespoons of water. I started on my dry ingredients by sifting 1.5 cups of gluten-free flour. This step is really important because it ensures that there aren't lumps of flour in your batter. And I then added half a cup of desiccated coconut. The recipe just said half and didn't specify the measurement, so this was a guess. Then came 3/4 cups of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon baking soda, half teaspoon cardamom, 1 tablespoon chai mix, half a cup of chopped pecans, and 15 chopped dates that I separated individually because I didn't want them sticking together in the batter. I mixed this up and then moved on to the wet ingredients. I only learned this a few years ago, so in case nobody knows, the easiest way to peel a banana is from the bottom towards the stem. I know the recipe said to blend the 3 ripe bananas, but I didn't want to do the extra dishes, so I just mashed them up with a fork. Because the bananas were so ripe, this released a delicious aroma of vanilla, which was divine. Halfway through mashing the bananas, I added half a cup of soy milk to help incorporate them, and then added half a cup of vegan butter. The recipe didn't specify when we needed to add the butter, so again, I just guessed. I always measure my butter based on the lines the packet provides. Half of the packet is a cup, and then 1/4 of the packet is half a cup. Once the wet ingredients were mixed, I poured them into the dry ingredients and gently incorporated the dry ingredients into the wet so that when I started folding them together, the powder wouldn't fly all over. And then I scooped under and folded over, which is one of the most common mixing techniques in baking. At this point, the batter was looking a little dry to me, and that's when I remembered that I forgot the flax egg, so I quickly added that in. This is why it's very important to trust your own judgment when baking. Okay, so I know that banana bread is usually made in a loaf tin, but I read some nonsense in this recipe that asked us to wait 10 to 15 minutes after taking the banana bread out of the oven, because if you pop it right out of the tin when it's hot, it will fall apart. And I just couldn't bear the thought of having to wait, so I decided to bake chai coconut banana muffins. And I found these cute lilac and lavender cases, which were perfect because Mom's favorite color is purple. After putting the muffin cases in the tin, I double checked each case to make sure that I hadn't accidentally put 2, and then I filled them up. I like to use a tablespoon to do this, even though it's much smaller than the muffin case, because it helps me reduce the amount of batter that falls everywhere except in the muffin case. I fill the muffin cases almost to the top, which I know is a bit much, but I like my muffins overflowing. I even had extra batter for 2 tiny ramekins. I popped everything in the oven and then I took them out at 17 minutes. I double checked with a toothpick to make sure they were cooked inside. Here I'm checking all 4 corners of my muffin tin because ovens rarely have an even temperature all around. Okay, I am going to take off this apron that I really did not use. I will now continue to not wear an apron when I bake because, yeah, don't really see the point in them. Anyway, this right here, this moment is exactly why I chose muffins instead of a loaf, because I cannot wait. I'm not gonna wait the 10 to 15 minutes. That to me is a ridiculous ask. I am just gonna try it right now. It's like piping hot. And I have cat's tongue, which if you're not familiar, basically you just don't have the capacity to eat hot food or drink hot tea. Yeah, you have to wait like 10 minutes after everybody else. But I'm just gonna go for it because it smells divine. So I am actually really glad that I did not put less batter because they hardly rose. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, the flavor.
I love the pecans in there. They're so good. I don't think it matters that I mashed the banana by hand. I don't mind that there are bits of banana in there. I also love that it's not too sweet because it allows the dates to shine. It's so wonderful to get a date in your mouth. And I think the amount of dates I put in were great because I get a date with every bite. So I can definitely taste the gluten-free flour. I feel like if you used white flour, it would be a lot lighter. And I wonder if that's why it didn't rise. I'm not really familiar with gluten-free flour. Somebody who was just trying to get rid of it passed it on to me. I think these would taste delicious with some salted butter because that would just bring the flavors out. The spices was such a good idea. If I had to rate this, so let's say I went into a store and I bought this, I'd probably give it a solid 7 out of 10. I think for me, I still need to get used to the gluten-free flour, and that is what's preventing me from giving it a total 10 out of 10. Taste-wise, everything else is absolutely delicious. We have the coconut, the banana, the dates, the brown sugar, the spices. Such a wonderful combination, honestly. Texture-wise, everything else also slaps, like the pecans, we have some of the grated coconut in there, the creaminess that the butter and the milk and the bananas gave it. I also love a little bit of gooiness in there. The biggest challenge when Mom and I transformed things from dairy and sugar and nut and gluten to dairy-free and gluten-free and nut-free and sugar-free was the taste and texture. And I know like people say, oh, you know, for gluten-free standards it's great, but like I want it to be great.
Period.
Like I grew up in a household where we often cooked without dairy and we often cooked without gluten and we often cooked without sugars and we often cooked without nuts, and everything still tasted delicious. It didn't feel like I was missing anything. So yeah, I need to work on this recipe a little bit. I am gonna research gluten-free flour. I'm gonna figure out how to work with it better. This was my first time using it. And if y'all have any suggestions, if y'all have worked with gluten-free flour before, let me know. What do I need to do? What do I not need to do? So I rated the muffin, and now I want to rate the feel. I gotta say, this experience was 10 out of 10 for me. It was so nice baking. It was such a good idea to bake something I'd never baked before because it required more of my brain space, and that allowed my feelings to kind of take a step back. But they still peeked through. Certain smells, certain tastes reminded me of Mom, and just the movement in the kitchen, specific practices you use for baking. I always feel her when I do those. When she was alive, but especially now. Throughout the process, I had these flashbacks of her doing exactly what I was doing, but in a different recipe, and that was really special. One of the things I love about baked goods are how they feel when they're going down your body. The warmth that they just instantly bring feels like a hug for your belly, and it was the same today. I really feel like I've just been hugged by Mom. So 10 out of 10. Thank you so much for joining me today, and if you were baking, thank you for baking together. If you weren't baking, thank you for staying till the end of this video. I appreciate you all so much. Bye.